Hello everyone. This is our second video on an important but neglected aspect of the history of Sedgwick County, Kansas. As many of you know, more than 1,000 Civil War veterans came to this area after the conflict. Indeed, more than 900 are buried in the two largest cemeteries in Wichita, Highland and Maple Grove. In this presentation, we focus on a group of Union veterans who were photographed, many in their Civil War uniforms. Here are a few of those buried in Wichita. We will discuss them later, and here is a group of several more buried in Sedgwick County. There are many more photos to come. One of the most prosperous was a former slave who joined the Union Army and later had a successful career in Wichita real estate as a developer and builder. Jacob McAfee's story is stranger than fiction. He was born a slave in Kentucky about 1837. He escaped to Ohio and enlisted in the Union Army's 27th Regiment, U.S. Colored. In July 1864, he was shot in the foot at the Battle of Petersburg in Virginia. He would limp for the rest of his life. Discharged from the Army, Corporal McAfee came west to Kansas with his family in 1865. He settled in Wichita and became a successful real estate agent and developer. He would join the Garfield Post of the Grand Army of the Republic and march with several other black soldiers in parades. As a developer, he constructed one of the first brick office buildings in the area. Hearing of his business success, the widow of his former master in Kentucky, now old and nearly blind, wrote him. She sent him her money in 1887 to invest in Wichita property. McAfee's wealth at the time was estimated at $50,000, $2 million in present-day dollars. At his death in 1918, McAfee was the owner of 50 residences and buildings. He is buried in Highland Cemetery. Another ex-slave who distinguished himself in a different way was Joe Abel. Born in 1813 to Kentucky slave owners during the War of 1812, Abel enlisted in the 13th U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery Regiment during the Civil War. In the late 1880s, he and his family moved to Wichita, where they resided for 27 years. Abel fathered 24 children, only 3 of whom survived their father. In 1916, during World War I, at age 103, Abel passed away. The Garfield Post of the GAR buried him with military honors in Maple Grove Cemetery. While many of the Civil War veterans did well with their farming, businesses, and professions, and contributed to the improvement of life in frontier Kansas, some did not. Perhaps the most infamous was Jack Ledford, who served with the 2nd Missouri Light Artillery and was buried in Highland Cemetery in 1871. After the Civil War, he made a living robbing stagecoaches and stealing horses. Stories abound about his death in 1871. By then, Ledford was a notorious murderer and outlaw whose Star Bar Half Moon gang terrorized people. He came to Wichita, where he married Alice Harris in January 1871. They operated a 3-story hotel called Harris House, which they opened shortly after their marriage. John met his demise a few weeks later on, in February 1871. A U.S. deputy marshal and about 28 cavalrymen rode into Wichita to arrest him. John came out of an outhouse and started shooting. His gun misfired. Wounded, he threw the gun aside and walked across the street to a cigar store, sat down on an empty barrel, and lit a cigar before dying. Now let's introduce three of the soldiers seen earlier in our presentation: Abe Carpenter, Benjamin Downing, and John Exton. Abraham Carpenter, a farmer from Bedford County, Pennsylvania, who enlisted at age 19 in the Pennsylvania Infantry, has an unusual claim to fame. He rose from private to corporal and fought in a number of battles as his regiment pursued General Robert E. Lee after Gettysburg. But his real fame came later. He is the grandfather of Harleen Carpenter, known to millions as Hollywood's film star Jean Harlow, the original blonde bombshell of the 1930s. She starred in films with Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. Abe Carpenter farmed in Pratt County for about 50 years before coming to Wichita, where he lived his last 13 years. He died in 1933 and is buried in Highland Cemetery. Harlow, making a film in Hollywood, could not attend his funeral. Another Pennsylvanian with a distinguished combat record was Benjamin Downing. He was an officer with the Pennsylvania Infantry Unit. He saw combat in some 20 battles. Downing was wounded at Spotsylvania Courthouse and suffered from its effects for the rest of his life. After coming to Wichita, he served in a number of public offices and at the time of his death was Commissioner of Elections. He is buried in Maple Grove. Another injured veteran was John Exton, an officer with another Pennsylvania artillery unit. He was wounded in the arm, face, and shoulder at Petersburg. He came to Wichita and engaged in stone construction. Exton may have been clairvoyant, foreseeing the future. As the city of Wichita expanded, he complained that autos and streetcars went too fast. He preferred the slower life of Caldwell, Sumner County, where he had 200 acres and a 14-room home. He is buried in Highland Cemetery. Another wounded veteran lying in Highland is Henry Hank Heiserman. He fought with the 77th Pennsylvania Infantry. Heiserman enlisted in September 1861 when he was only 15 years of age. He was in many bloody contests. Wounded and taken prisoner at Chickamauga, he escaped from a rebel hospital and rejoined his regiment. He later lost his right leg in the Battle of Atlanta. Heiserman came to Sedgwick County in 1870 and settled on a farm near Mount Hope. He was elected Registrar of Deeds in the 1880s during a period of rapid real estate expansion. At that time, there was no salary for the office, only fees. It is estimated that Heiserman earned more than any other elected official in Kansas, about $50,000 per year. It's the equivalent of about $2 million today. Heiserman frittered away his earnings on bad investments and died in modest circumstances. Canadian-born Jeremiah Simpson is another enlistee who entered politics. He served briefly with the 12th Illinois Infantry, but was discharged with a disability. He came to Kansas and settled on a farm near Medicine Lodge. A populist, Simpson was known as Sockless Jerry. He served 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is buried in Maple Grove. Victor Murdoch, the Wichita Eagle editor who succeeded Simpson in Congress, delivered a powerful funeral oration. He had been the one who, as a young reporter, quipped that the new congressman wore no socks. Simpson had reported that the statement had been made by a little red-headed reporter who was rotten before he was ripe. A wealthy pioneer resting in Maple Grove is Captain Merrick R. Diver, a horse trader and stable owner, thought to have had an estate of about $300,000 at the time of his death in 1929. worth about $6 million in contemporary dollars. Captain Diver, who served in the 69th Missouri Infantry, is buried in Maple Grove next to his first wife. He came to national attention in late 1928 when he eloped and married his longtime female companion on the day a probate court ruled him incompetent. 4 years of sensational litigation eventually made its way to the Kansas Supreme Court. The court voided his marriage, leaving what little remained after the legal fees for several blood relatives. Madison McAllister and his father both enlisted in the Ohio Infantry. Madison, then age 16, became a drummer. At Gettysburg, a horse fell on him, crushing his chest. Unable to use his left arm, he was mustered out as a disabled soldier. He came to Kansas in the early 1870s and ranched. Later, he became Sedgwick County coroner, a post he held for 18 years. At his funeral in 1916, members of the Garfield Post of the Grand Army of the Republic paid tribute to him with an impressive service. He is buried in Maple Grove Cemetery. A number of the veterans were captured and held in Confederate jails. Some were held in the infamous Andersonville prison, where, as we noted in our first presentation, 13,000 died from disease and starvation. During the war, Union and Confederate armies sometimes exchanged prisoners. The paroled prisoners frequently returned to their units and continued the fight. Here are 3 more veterans who were captured by the enemy: Daniel Gonzalez, John McAdams, and Andrew Fabrique. Daniel Gonzalez was a captain in the 83rd Ohio Infantry. He was in many battles in Tennessee and Mississippi. Wounded at Vicksburg, he was laid up 3 months and taken prisoner and held for 8 months at Camp Ford in Texas. During his imprisonment, he suffered great hardships. A farmer, he is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery. One of the most daring prison escapes involved Lieutenant John McAdams of the 10th West Virginia Infantry. He and a small group of prisoners tunneled out of a Confederate jail in Columbia, South Carolina in the autumn of 1864 and made their way to Knoxville, Tennessee, a distance of about 260 miles, where they rejoined Union forces. McAdams, who operated a restaurant in Wichita, is buried in Highland Cemetery. Several Wichita physicians acquired experience in the Union Army. Among them was Dr. Andrew Fabrique, who served in the 53rd Indiana Infantry. When war was declared, he enlisted and served for 4 years, obtaining the rank of major. Dr. Fabrique took part in some of the bloodiest battles of the war, among them Shiloh, the siege of Vicksburg, and the siege of Atlanta. He was with General Sherman's army when it marched across Georgia to the sea. In May 1862, Fabrique was taken prisoner at Memphis, Tennessee, but he escaped an hour later. Fabrique later attended Northwestern University Medical School. He came to Kansas, locating at Wichita in March 1870. Here he practiced medicine and surgery for over 40 years. He is remembered as the father of the medical profession in Wichita. Fabrique lived in one home for 58 years. He is buried in Maple Grove Cemetery. Dr. Henry Owens had combat experience as a private with the Iowa Infantry. He was in 17 battles and was wounded at Black River Bridge in Mississippi. When Dr. Owens died in 1897, the GAR escorted his remains to his final resting place in Highland Cemetery. Another physician, Dr. Martin Rochelle, came to Wichita in 1872. A native of Ohio, he had enlisted in the infantry and been wounded in the right shoulder in fighting at Savannah. A cancer specialist, he treated 3,000 patients in Wichita. He is buried in Maple Grove Cemetery. Now a few words about John Cossett, Benjamin Plummer, and two Cale brothers. John M. Cossett, a sergeant with the Illinois Infantry, is buried in Maple Grove. He participated in substantial combat. His regiment suffered 218 deaths in battles in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia. An engineer, Cossett and members of his family left an important collection of late 19th century photographs to the Wichita Public Library. Benjamin Franklin Plummer lies in Highland Cemetery. He had served with the 11th Missouri State Militia Cavalry. His regiment lost 30 men in combat, 186 to disease. A farmer and laborer, he was active in the Garfield GAR post. There are two Cale brothers in Wichita cemeteries, both of whom served in Illinois infantry units and were members of the Garfield post of the GAR. We don't have a photograph for Corporal David Preston Cale, who rests in Highland Cemetery. He served with 123rd Illinois Infantry for 3 years and was a member of the famous Wilder's Lightning Hatchet Brigade. Colonel Wilder had mounted this regiment on mules and horses and armed the soldiers with long-handled hatchets and Spencer repeating rifles that could fire 7 bullets. The Spencer rifles had 7 times the firepower of muzzle-loading weapons. A second Cale brother, James C. Cale, rests in Maple Grove. He was a private with another Illinois infantry unit. His regiment was involved in heavy battles across Kentucky and Tennessee and in the Atlanta campaign. The two Cale brothers are related to Eric Cale, the executive director of the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum. Here is another group of the boys in blue buried in Wichita. Matthias Mosier was a lieutenant with the Pennsylvania Infantry. He came to Sedgwick County in 1872 and in time became a specialty fruit raiser. On his farm east of Wichita, he had 33 acres in fruit, including apple, peach, cherry, and pear trees. Mosier was in 19 battles and was wounded 4 times. A member of the Garfield post, he is buried in Highland Cemetery. Major Arthur Burr was another wounded veteran. He participated in the Shiloh battle in Tennessee and was wounded later near Holly Springs, Mississippi. He came to Wichita in 1870 and served as health officer. He is buried in Highland Cemetery. Lieutenant Edward Forward, a sharpshooter with the 64th Illinois Infantry, was wounded multiple times in 33 different battles. He came to the Wichita area in 1878 and farmed. He rests in Greenwood Cemetery, Wichita. Lieutenant Russell Caswell served with the 84th Illinois Infantry. His regiment was involved in a number of significant battles in Kentucky and Tennessee and suffered 269 fatalities. Coming to Wichita in 1887, Caswell was a hardware merchant. He is buried in Maple Grove Cemetery. Colonel William Innes, an Illinois soldier born in Scotland, was a pioneer merchant and prominent businessman during the early growth of Wichita. Innes had a distinguished military record. He was taken prisoner in 1862 and held for 6 months in a Georgia cotton mill. When he was exchanged, he returned to his unit, the 19th Illinois. In subsequent battles, Innes displayed such bravery and valor that he was promoted to colonel and made commander of the 15th U.S. Colored Infantry. During the Civil War, as many of you know, whites commanded African American units. Colonel Innes is buried in Maple Grove Cemetery. Now for a final group of veterans seen earlier: Henry Bauman, Hollis Wilson, and Zaven Lanning. They lie in county cemeteries outside Wichita. Captain Henry Clay Bauman, who served with the 59th Illinois, is buried in Pioneer Cemetery, Cheney. He had extensive service from June 1861 to January 1866 and participated in General Sherman's March to the Sea in Georgia. He owned a farm in Reno County. Hollis Wilson, a corporal with the 108th Illinois Infantry, rests in Pleasant Ridge Cemetery, Goddard. He saw extensive combat along the Mississippi and at Vicksburg. Coming to Sedgwick County in 1882, he acquired 640 acres of farmland and managed another 4,000 acres for Eastern investors. Zayvon Lanning, a lieutenant with the Ohio Infantry, was involved in 13 hand-to-hand combat battles in Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, and the Carolinas. A farmer, he sleeps in Pleasant Valley Cemetery, Bentley. My last veteran in this presentation is Captain John Brent Fishback, who commanded the 1st Kentucky Cavalry after the death of a senior officer. He served for a time as clerk of the Wichita City Courts. He was struck and killed by an automobile in Wichita while crossing an icy street in January 1920. He is buried in Cowley County. These are among several thousand Civil War veterans who came to Wichita and Sedgwick County. The largest number of their graves are in Highland and Maple Grove cemeteries in Wichita. In Highland Cemetery, there is a special section of veterans who joined the Eggleston Post of the Grand Army of the Republic. In Maple Grove Cemetery is the Old Soldiers' Circle and a pavilion surrounded by some 84 graves of Union veterans. It was erected by the Women's Relief Corps and dedicated in 1900. For those of you who want to learn more about the veterans buried in Sedgwick County, I recommend a visit to the memorial at the old courthouse and to county cemeteries, especially to Highland and Maple Grove. Information about the veterans can be found online in Find a Grave, Ancestry, and through back files of Wichita newspapers accessible via newspapers.com. Finally, a personal note. In researching the veterans, I was impressed with how many had gone to war as young teenagers, at age 15 or less. Joseph Richardson, the musician mentioned in our first video, was only 13 when he enlisted as a drummer boy in the 122nd Illinois. Whatever their motivations for enlisting, these veterans soon encountered the brutal side of war. Some of these, Hank Heiserman, for example, lost limbs by the age of 18. Madison McAllister was only 18 when a horse crushed his chest at Gettysburg and left him disabled. Yet these young men overcame their disabilities. They traveled hundreds of miles to frontier Kansas, eager to start new lives. This is an incredible story. In presenting it to you, we seek to honor the memory of these veterans. Thank you for listening.